In the headboard of Robert Hansen's bed, investigators found a map. It was a standard aviation chart of the region surrounding Anchorage, Alaska, marked with more than 30 small X symbols. Each X was a location in the Alaskan wilderness. Each location was a grave. Hansen confessed to 17 murders. 12 bodies were recovered from the sites marked on that map. Several marks he refused to explain entirely. The land knew. The land had always known. It took investigators 12 years, one 17-year-old girl who escaped in handcuffs, and a map hidden in a man's bedroom to make the land give up what it was holding. Robert Hansen's method was unlike anything investigators had ever documented. He would abduct a woman, drive her to a small airfield outside Anchorage, load her into his private plane, and fly her deep into the wilderness. Then he would release her, give her a head start, and hunt her down with a rifle, the same way he had hunted elk and bear across Alaska for 2 decades. This is the story of Robert Hansen, the butcher baker of Anchorage, and this is how the wilderness convicted him. Robert Christian Hansen was born on February 15, 1939, in Estherville, Iowa, the eldest son of a Danish immigrant who ran a bakery and expected his children to do the same. Hansen's childhood was defined by what he lacked. He was small for his age. He developed severe cystic acne as a teenager that left permanent scarring across his face and neck, visible, impossible to ignore, the kind of mark that other teenagers noticed immediately. He stuttered badly, worse under pressure, which made every classroom, every conversation, every social interaction a source of potential humiliation. His father was a demanding man. The bakery came first. Hansen remembered being pulled from sleep at 2 in the morning on school days to work the ovens before class. He arrived exhausted, scarred, stuttering, and fell further behind socially with every passing year. The only place he felt competent was the woods. Alone with a bow or a rifle, tracking animals through the Iowa countryside. There were no social hierarchies, no stuttering, no acne. There was only the hunt. And at the hunt, Robert Hansen was genuinely exceptional. He became one of the most accomplished bow hunters in his region, a skill that would follow him and define him for the rest of his life. In 1967, Hansen relocated to Anchorage, Alaska, with his second wife and 2 young children. He opened a bakery on Old Seward Highway. He joined a church. He participated in community organizations. The cops who worked the neighborhood came in regularly for coffee and donuts. Hansen greeted them by name. He got his pilot's license in the late 1960s and purchased a small Piper Super Cub, a single-engine bush plane capable of landing on gravel bars and frozen riverbeds throughout the Alaskan interior. He used it ostensibly for hunting, trips. His trophy room was full of record-class Dall sheep, caribou and bear. Several entries in the Pope and Young Club record books bore his name. He was, by every external measure, a quiet success story, an immigrant son who had built something real in America's last frontier. In 1971, something shifted. The focus of his hunts changed. The first body was found near a power line road leading to Eklutna Lake, northeast of Anchorage. A young woman, never identified. Investigators called her Eklutna Annie. She remains unidentified to this day, one of the few victims for whom the land has given up no name. The pattern that followed was slow and quiet. Women disappeared from Anchorage. Dancers, prostitutes, runaways. Women whose absence was not immediately reported because their lives existed at the margins of a city that was still largely lawless. Still flush with pipeline money, still the kind of place where people arrived to disappear and often succeeded. Joanna Messina was found in a gravel pit near Seward in 1980. Sherry Morrow, 23 years old, a dancer at a club on 4th Avenue, was found in a shallow grave along the Nick River in 1981, still wearing her swimsuit. Paula Goulding, 17 years old, was found on the banks of the same river in September of 1983 by a road construction crew. Alaska State Trooper Detective Glenn Floth was assigned to the case in the early 1980s. He began to notice what the land was telling him. The burial sites were not roadside dumps. They were remote, accessible only to someone with knowledge of the terrain and a method of transport that most people do not have. The graves were shallow, dug quickly, efficiently, by someone who had done this before and had a system. The victims were stripped of identification. Their clothing was sometimes missing, sometimes present but cut or removed in specific ways. This was not impulsive. This was practiced. Floth had 3 confirmed victims and a pattern that pointed toward a single perpetrator. What he needed was a profile and a name to put to it. Stop here for a moment, because this is where the case teaches you something about how forensic behavioral analysis actually works. When investigators look at a crime scene, they are not just looking for fingerprints and fibers. They are looking for decisions. Every choice the perpetrator made, where to take the victim, how to transport them, where to bury them, what to take, what to leave, is a data point about who that person is. In Hansen's case, the data points formed a specific picture. The use of a plane meant the perpetrator had a pilot's license and access to a private aircraft, a detail that immediately narrowed the suspect pool. The remote burial sites meant knowledge of specific terrain that only experienced wilderness travelers would have. The organization of the crime scenes, the consistency, the method, pointed towards someone who felt in control in remote environments, but who may have struggled with control in social ones. FBI profiler John Douglas, brought in to consult on the case, predicted the perpetrator would be a white male in his late 30s to 40s, with low self-esteem, likely suffering from a physical defect or speech impediment, possibly with a history of minor criminal behavior that had been handled leniently by the system. He predicted the suspect would be an avid hunter with wilderness expertise and access to private aviation. He predicted the suspect would be outwardly unremarkable, someone with a stable public life that provided cover. Every element of that profile would match Robert Hansen exactly. But profiles are not evidence, and the system was about to demonstrate just how effectively an outwardly unremarkable man can walk through it undetected. On the night of June 13, 1983, a 17-year-old girl named Cindy Paulson was working on 4th Avenue in Anchorage when a man approached her. He was small, his face was scarred, he stuttered slightly when he spoke. He offered her $200 for an hour of her time and drove her to a house in a quiet residential neighborhood. What happened inside that house would not come out in full detail until years later. What is documented is this: Paulson was held for several hours. She was handcuffed. In the early morning hours of June 14th, Hansen loaded her into his vehicle and drove her to Merrill Field, a small general aviation airfield on the eastern edge of Anchorage, intending to fly her into the wilderness. She ran. Still handcuffed, Paulson sprinted across the tarmac and flagged down a passing truck driver on the road adjacent to the airfield. The driver took her to a nearby motel. Police were called. Paulson gave investigators a description that was precise and consistent. The stutter, the acne scarring, the house, the handcuffs, the airfield, the small plane she had been led toward. She named him. Anchorage police located Hansen within hours. He was calm. He had an explanation for the evening. 2 of his friends, both respected local businessmen, confirmed his alibi without hesitation. A judge reviewed the complaint and the alibi. He noted that Hansen had been known to law enforcement for several years and had always cooperated. He found the alibi credible. Cindy Paulson's account was classified as unsubstantiated. Hansen went home. Within weeks, he abducted and killed Paula Goulding, whose body would be found by road workers 3 months later on the banks of the Nick River. Floth did not close the file. He cross-referenced Paulson's description with the behavioral profile Douglas had constructed: the stutter, the scarring, the pilot's license, the wilderness expertise, the calm public persona. Every element matched one name. He applied for a search warrant. The search of Hansen's home on Old Harbor Avenue took place in October of 1983. In the attic, investigators found jewellery, multiple pieces belonging to multiple different women, items that did not belong to Hansen's wife, items consistent with what missing women had been wearing at the time of their disappearances. In the gun safe, they found a Ruger Mini 14 rifle chambered in .223 caliber. Ballistics analysis matched shell casings recovered from 3 of the wilderness burial sites to that specific weapon. In the basement, behind a wall panel, they found the room where Cindy Paulson had been held, and in the headboard of Robert Hansen's bed, underneath a false panel, they found the aviation chart. More than 30 X marks, more locations than there were confirmed victims. Floth and Assistant District Attorney Frank Rothschild sat across from Hansen in the interrogation room. They laid the map on the table between them. They told him their plan: to wait for these. Spring thaw, take search teams to every marked location, match the bodies to his weapons and his trophies, and build a case that would take the rest of his life. Hansen looked at the map for a long time, then he confessed. Robert Hansen led investigators across south-central Alaska through the winter and spring of 1984. He flew with them in a state police aircraft over the terrain he had used as his hunting ground, pointing down at the earth below, identifying locations, saying there and there and there. 12 bodies were recovered. Several marks on the map he refused to explain entirely, offering only partial information about what had happened at those sites. Investigators believe the true number of his victims may be significantly higher than 17. In February of 1984, Hansen pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and a series of assault and kidnapping charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, plus 461 years, without the possibility of parole. As part of his plea agreement, he requested to be transferred to a federal facility outside Alaska to lessen, his attorney said, the likelihood of encountering people connected to his crimes or his victims. The request was granted. He spent the following decades largely out of public view, declining most interview requests and avoiding the kind of media attention that had consumed other killers of his generation. For a man whose crimes were defined by the desire for control, prison offered a specific and final form of it. He could control, to some extent, how he was remembered. On August 21, 2014, Robert Hansen died in an Anchorage hospital at the age of 75. The cause was reported as natural. One of his victims, found near Horseshoe Lake, known for years only as Horseshoe Harriet, was not identified until 2021, when forensic DNA genealogy confirmed she was Robin Pelkey, 19 years old at the time of her murder. Her family had not reported her missing. Eklutna Annie, the first known victim found near the power line road to Eklutna Lake, has never been identified. She remains in the record as a name given to her by investigators, a mark on a map that the land has not yet given back. But here is what I keep coming back to. Cindy Paulson told the truth. She told it clearly, consistently, and in specific detail. She gave investigators a name, a location, a description of a room, a description of an airfield, and a description of a plane. She was 17 years old, and she had just escaped in handcuffs. And the system looked at Robert Hansen, his friends, his bakery, his church membership, his calm demeanour, and decided she was less credible than he was. This is not a story about a monster who was impossible to catch. Hansen's name was given to police by a surviving victim in June of 1983. Paula Goulding was murdered after that. Her body was found 3 months later. 12 other burial sites on that map post-date the moment Cindy Paulson walked into a police station and told them exactly who had taken her. What the forensic evidence showed, the shell casings, the jewellery, the map, the room, was not hidden. It was sitting in a house in a quiet residential neighbourhood in Anchorage. The rifle was in a gun safe. The map was in the headboard. The trophies were in the attic. None of it required sophisticated technology. None of it required new methodology. It required someone to go inside that house. The evidence was always there. The wilderness was always keeping it. The only variable was whether the system would decide that a 17-year-old girl in handcuffs was worth believing. She was telling the truth from the moment she flagged down that truck. I think about that a lot.